Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching this in-depth ag forecast brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. I want to start off with a view here of our jet stream level winds because I'm noticing that not only now but in the longer range forecasts, some of the waves, the jet stream waves, are getting to be quite long. And those long wave patterns tend to have a tendency to get established and then kind of stay established. In fact, they often retrograde. What I'm talking about is the fact that you see the flow very quickly moving across part of the Pacific Ocean with multiple areas of lower heights and lower pressure here, and then a big ridge, the big subtropical ridge to the south. There's also a downstream ridge right here that's set up over the Four Corner states, and you can see the flow around it. And it, of course, is diving into a trough that's here over the eastern side of the United States where there's quite a bit of cooler weather right now. Now, the reason why we need to diagnose this pattern and where it's going is because if it tends to stay with these longer waves, we're going to look for anything that could possibly displace that. We're going to look for anything that could cause things to get blocked up and stuck, and what that could mean for our weather patterns moving forward. Now, right now, momentum is quite high across the Pacific. If there's any blocking in the northern hemisphere or any places where there's low momentum, it's over parts of Europe where there's this huge high that's moving across parts of Central Europe right now. But why I'm discussing this is let's just go down and look at the surface level winds. Okay, now we've kind of zoomed around here, looking a little different view, but you can see tucked away in that trough, look at this low that's curling up here. We have a tropical system off the tip of the Baja. We have what was named yesterday, this was Mindy. Mindy kind of came right here across this part of Florida into Georgia, and we have Larry out here, and Larry is on his way toward Newfoundland, which is in this direction. But generally speaking, there's our larger ridge that's in place right here, and then we have the cooler air coming behind the low that's moved through the Great Lakes states, in fact, hitting most of the East Coast. Now, since we've been talking about these tropical systems, I want to take you elsewhere around the world to show you one thing I'm going to be watching carefully. So we're going to pivot the map around and have a look right over here. So this is a typhoon that is forecast over the next couple of days to move toward Taiwan and then eventually toward Japan. And it's that time of year where we have to be watching for these typhoons to get absorbed into the jet stream level flow coming across the Pacific, because they could, in effect, amplify the trough ridge pattern that eventually downstream comes over parts of North America. Now, that particular system right now, by the time we get out to next Tuesday, is expected to be just south, here of the Japanese islands. And it's expected to maintain, typhoon strength or hurricane strength as it does move to the north. And the question I have is, how far does it eventually make it, and what does it do to this overall pattern? Some of the latest data we have from the GFS and the European model do suggest that it helps reinforce some troughing over the Aleutian Islands. And so what I want to do is I want to see the latest updates on what that means for our 500 millibar height pattern. So much of our forecast hinges on the next few things I'm about to share with you. So currently today, there's our large ridge over the southwest, and over the southeast we have this trough. In fact, that trough connects clear back up to the Hudson Bay. Now, as I play this forward, what you're going to see is that ridge opens up throughout the rest of this week and weekend, and it's going to be spreading its heat over here into the Midwest and eventually to the East Coast. And the nearest trough just skirts here along the U.S.-Canada border over into Ontario. That means we're going to see some temperatures really rebounding across the east. Now, getting out here to Sunday, into Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. We do have a system on Tuesday that skirts through again, following that U.S.-Canada border storm track. But look at the lower heights and therefore deeper troughs that are becoming established here in the Gulf of Alaska and into western parts of Canada. Because as we play out Wednesday into Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, now we really start to see the pattern adjust. So this is going to be a major kind of inflection in what the EPO and the PNA, you often hear me talk about those two teleconnections, are going to do. And we'll open up a broader ridge that'll be downstream here, but this is going to mark a pretty substantial pattern change for the Pacific Northwest. And we start to think about these deeper troughs coming through, and if we just go ahead and play this on out, what does this possibly mean for maybe bringing in frost conditions into this area? So I want to talk about temperatures first today. I think that's going to be something that's going to be on the front of mind for us for a while as we finish out this month of September. So that's the overall pattern. And can you see those longer waves in place? That, I think, is going to be key to understanding if the pattern has any sort of permanence to it. Now, I want to show you some new stuff that I plan to release to all of you very soon. I'm almost finished doing this. And what we're going to do here, let's zoom back out so we can see a little bit better, is I'm looking at some data for Glasgow. So here we are in Montana. Now, the graph that's down here shows you, using the PRISM data set, what our year-to-date total accumulated growing degree day units are. And you can see that right now we are way ahead of average, at least ahead of the last 5 years. But you see these bars that are jumping up here? Those are the typical last frost of spring and the first frost of fall. And have you noticed here, well, we have frost events sometimes that occur even this early in the season. But on average, our first frost is somewhere in this part of Montana toward the end of the month of September. That's what these dates are sharing with us. Now, just thinking about that, I'm going to come back and take a look at what the temperatures are going to do. We're going to focus on max temperatures first because I'm not expecting a frost in the next week. Remember, this is out into that week 2 time period. So as we play this forward, the ridge starts to open. So look at the heat that's going to be here. It's going to move to the east as expected. And as it does so, we finally give a break to California. We give a break to the northwest, and we start to see some cooler temperatures for this time of year settling into the Canadian prairie and across the northern plains of the U.S., while triple-digit heat just sits over parts of the southern plains and extends into the Midwest. Well, into the weekend we go. There is a frontal boundary stretched right in through here. I'll show you in a few moments. Where to the north of it, we have some cooler weather, but it doesn't last too long. And out there into Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday of next week, we really just see that heat getting pushed farther and farther to the east. In fact, if we just look exclusively at day 5 through 10, let's get the latest update from this map. There it is. What we end up seeing here is that much of this section of the country is going to be seeing some above average temperatures. But it's the cooler pattern I'm seeing here that I want to have a discussion about. Because going out from day 5 through 10 to day 10 through 15, now we start to see that pushing a bit farther, onshore here, out of the Gulf of Alaska, and then moving into this direction. Now remember, I started the discussion about that tropical system that's going toward Taiwan and eventually Japan. And I have concerns that we could amplify that trough once we get out there about day 10 through day 15. It's a long ways out, but we need to talk about it. So there are several different ways that we can look out for those frost events. And the way I like to do it at this time of year is to pay attention to the pattern and then try to see what the models are suggesting in terms of the probability of getting those temperatures down there below those frost points. So what I'd like to do here first is I want to animate for you a suite of forecasting maps from the European ensemble that show us in color the probability of getting a temperature below 32 degrees Fahrenheit. And you notice I have to get out here past like the 15th and 16th of the month before we start to see those numbers really showing up. And they primarily show up right here at very high elevation. But we know that it's not just looking for a chance at getting a temperature at 32. Sometimes when the forecast is for temperatures in the low 40s, low 40s to upper 30s, we can sometimes get those low-lying areas with the cold air drainage, clear skies, light winds, and we get a frost. So watch what I'm about to do here. We're on September 19th. Let's flip this over to look for the probability of having a temperature below 40 now. And what we see is that getting out there about day 10, 11, 12 in the forecast, that takes us out, well, September 21st, this would be the fall equinox. We now just start to see better chances of getting colder air tucked away into that trough. And I just want to watch it and be aware of it, that it's a possibility and it's climatologically consistent, all right? So this just is something I'm thinking about for the prairie and the very far western side of the northern plains, specifically Montana. It's just something on my radar at this point, all right? The other things we're going to be watching is what's going on in the tropics. Now, Larry, we've talked about, heading in this direction. Mindy, out to open ocean, staying a depression. The features I want to keep an eye on are this one right here, which is currently given a 30% chance of developing. And as you can see, the National Hurricane Center is going to let this hug the coast of Mexico, which would be an indicator that it's going to have less possibility for intensifying rapidly. And don't forget, we have another wave that's emerged off of the coast of Africa, which the National Hurricane Center is giving a 60% chance of developing. But let's talk about the near-term threat, which would be from this one here. And the way to show that to you is I want to animate next the 12Z European model forecast for total accumulated precipitation. Now, we're going to talk about the pieces of this in a few moments, but as I kind of scroll through, you're going to see a few things happening. Through the weekend, really dry throughout the midsection of the country. As we then get past the weekend, I focus down here first. You're going to see coming out of the Gulf of Mexico toward coastal Texas that Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday of next week, The model right now is pulling in here better than a 10 to 12 inches of rainfall at this point. And that's a lot of very heavy rainfall. If we keep playing this out, you can really see it spreading here. Now, what we don't know is if it's going to be confined to this part of Texas. We don't know how far inland it's going to make, or if it's going to move over toward Louisiana. That is all still a possibility. And I will say this, if this tropical system doesn't hug the coast and instead gets out over open Gulf moisture, or excuse me, Gulf heat, we're going to have to worry about this really developing quickly. But at this point, I have no guidance to suggest that that's a possibility. It's just what we worry about this time of year. So thinking about all that, I'd like to show you the same thing, but look at the GFS model. It too has that same feature in through here, possibly bringing in some extremely heavy rainfall. There's differences. You can see it's farther to the east and not nearly the same extent of heavy rainfall. But at the same time, the GFS also has this, what's going through the Canadian prairie, and it's also picking up on some of the features that are changing here for the Pacific Northwest with that deeper trough coming through. So let's get to those details next. First, I'd like to show you latest satellite imagery we have here across the U.S. So this is what's left of Mindy, and there's Larry. And now you can really clearly see as I animate this in a few moments the extent of that ridge that is over the western part of the United States. So watch, if we just go back throughout the day today and play it forward again, you can see, just watch Mindy first, it's kind of neat. You can see what's going on with the leftover circulation from Mindy. Larry's still a powerhouse of a cyclone, but moving north, and it's going to miss the United States, thankfully kicked out by this front. You can also see the wildfire smoke running around the ridge where all that heat is building into this area. That smoke extending here into the high plains and the central plains of the United States. Now thinking about that, we do have red flag warnings, air quality alerts here. There's still excessive heat watches and warnings down here in the southwest, including the southern part of the San Joaquin Valley too. But when we think about that fire threat, there's a great product from the Storm Prediction Center. I don't often show it, but I want to make sure you're aware of it here. It's their Fire Weather Outlook. And so today you can see where they have their critical and elevated risks. But you can also see some other words like scattered dry T and iso dry T. They're referring here to the thunderstorm pattern. And we're going to notice that not only today on Thursday, but into Friday, this is going to be an area we're going to watch very carefully. And that's because the models are suggesting that storms are going to pop up there. See them? This is late this afternoon and this evening. And the chances of their rain making it to the surface is limited, but they could produce quite a bit of lightning. And as we get into the day on Friday, these isolated storms and maybe some broader showers that do move through parts of Oregon, coming out of Northern California and Nevada, they have the risk of potentially starting fire. So we're going to watch that carefully. A lot of scattered storm activity here getting into the day on Friday in this part of the Pacific Northwest. Now beyond that, we've got relatively not a whole lot going on in the midsection of the country over toward the East Coast. But as I work through the weekend and now take you out here to Saturday morning, and let's just go out to Saturday midday. Our first system skirts through parts of the Canadian prairie and then into Ontario and leaves a front right in through this area. And we're going to watch that one carefully. And here's the nose of that moisture coming out of the Bay of Campeche, coming through the Gulf, heading towards Texas. But to see where it goes from there, I'm going to flip over to the European model. So we've already seen through Saturday afternoon. So why don't we just fast forward it to that point? There we go. Here's Saturday evening getting into Sunday morning. Now at that particular point, our low pressure center is here, and there will be an elongated front right in through this area. So at the end of this weekend, we're going to watch for some showers and storms along that particular boundary. And you're going to see that through Sunday midday and getting into Sunday evening. Again, scattered storms in this area. All right. Now we start to see that pulse of moisture coming into the Gulf Coast here. And you can see the beginnings of the troughs that are setting up coming into the Pacific Northwest, such that by Monday at midday here, there's our leftover frontal boundary. There's the pulse of moisture coming into Texas, and we're going to have to watch for some low pressure developing here on the first of a series of short waves coming through the northern plains. So watch this. This is Monday afternoon getting into evening. Now going out here to Tuesday morning, afternoon, and evening. And now there's the pulse of moisture from the tropics. Here's our next low, so that formed and went like this, and it drags a front right through the Corn Belt here by Tuesday evening. And then that progresses to the east by Wednesday morning, afternoon, and evening. And now what that's going to do is it's going to link up, I think, with the pulse of moisture that came out of the tropics here. And we're going to see that going out to Wednesday all the way to Thursday morning, afternoon, and evening, that our moisture is going to be forced to stay pretty far to the south because of that. Now, starting a week from today, look at this low and how far to the south that moisture is getting. Now, we're just going to show you this, but not take it verbatim. Look at it push into the Pacific Northwest. I'll rock back and forth. This is Thursday, Friday, and Saturday of next week. And that is the pattern shift that we saw there. So stitching this all together, let's go look at a few different things here. First, same map, next 7 days of total accumulated precipitation from the Euro. We've seen this. Now we get how these fronts are slicing through here, through the Corn Belt. And we see the Canadian storm track and the tropical kind of push of moisture here. We also looked at the GFS, same time period. And overall, we could see some good agreement on the pattern, but there's always differences in the amounts. So notice that the GFS is got this front extended a little bit farther to the south here. And therefore, these are the colors that say the GFS is wetter. We see that in Iowa, Illinois, and Wisconsin. The European lingers things back a little bit farther to the north, and that's why it's wetter into this section of the country. Now, the European is much more aggressive on the westward and northward extent of that heavy precip coming out of the tropical impulse, and then the GFS is farther to the east. So wanted to kind of point out some of the differences here in our models as we look out over the next 7 days or so. From there, the pattern at day 10, remember, features this long wave trough. And I want to show you where it goes. You see, long waves tend to retrograde or resist moving. So throughout day 10 to day 12 and 13, it doesn't really go too much. You see, it really doesn't move too much. But we do see that it tries to open up and move a bit farther to the east. See it here? By September 24th. And again, that's that time period where I'm just starting to get concerned that we're going to have to be on the lookout for those overnight lows getting close to those frost temperatures here. Again, Canadian Prairie, Montana, and possibly, I'll have to watch it carefully, getting into the northern plains of the United States. But we'll talk more about temperatures in a second. First, this is what the precipitation pattern looks like. There's the week 2 kind of moisture coming into the Pacific Northwest. We're drier to the south of that deeper trough. This is what's left of the system that's coming here. Remember, we saw that. But where those waves kind of eject, we're going to see wetter conditions in through this area. And as you can see, the GFS ensemble suggests a very similar pattern as to what the European showed. Now from there, here's where the long-term discussion really gets going. The latest updates we've got from the ECMWF on the MJO just refuse to move it away from the Indian Ocean. So we get a lot of subsidence here over the Western Pacific. That's been ongoing. The second thing has to do with momentum. The greatest increases of momentum are in the southern hemisphere, and the loss of momentum we've seen here in the northern hemisphere has primarily been over Europe. This is going to be important down here for my South American video, which I'm going to release here in a few moments. But we combine that with the fact that we've recently seen some stronger trade winds. Our La Nina continues to be in place and developing, and the warmth that we have here in the North Pacific seem to be driving this pattern into fall. And so let's talk about that now that we've kind of reviewed some of these bigger teleconnections, because this is the brand new data that was just released. Now, I've been focusing in, let me fast forward you toward this. I've been focusing in on this pattern from about the, let's call it mid-September to mid-October. And what we've seen now is less of a dry bias here, but the pressure still seems to be increasing over the Appalachian Mountains. And the models are still wet through parts of, well, the Corn Belt and the Mid-South. We're continuing to see this region showing up with wetter anomalies around that high, which is spinning in this direction. We also see wetter conditions in the Pacific Northwest. But as I stated before, it does not appear that we're going to get that just stuck stationary boundary in this area. You got to have a big high sitting here and a big high sitting here for that to happen. I don't see that setting up, which means those super wet harvests like we had in 2018 as one of most recent memory is not what I'm foreseeing at this particular point. It just is not favoring drier conditions. It's just not through mid-October. Now beyond that, let's take a look at some brand new data to supplement what I shared with you on Monday. It comes from the National Multi-Model Ensemble. Let's go ahead and look at precipitation first. This is the latest update from the NMME on the October, November, December timeframe. And you can see that it is very La Nina-ish, like we saw the European model, with the wetter conditions in the Pacific Northwest, and you can now see where we expect it to be drier. That again is almost like just a copy of what the long-range European model was suggesting for October, November, December. And from there, let's go look at two other things. First, the temperatures over that time period, and you can see that it favors mild. Again, consistent with the picture we saw from the European model. And the last thing, well, why not? Let's just go out there and do it. Let's go out and see what winter's shaping up like. Whoops, I got to go one more season ahead. There we go. Notice anything? This looks exactly the same. Wetter, active Ohio River Valley storm track, drier along the south. That's exactly what the European model suggested. And in terms of temperatures, let's go out and have a look at that. It's got almost a very similar pattern, although it's got more of the warmth here versus the European, which backed it up further over the west. So now we've got all of our major models in. We've now compared them all, got a good picture of what's going on, and now you know what I'm worried about over the next couple of weeks. So I'm going to stop there and hope you all have a good rest of your week and weekend. And I'll bring you a new forecast update on Monday. Thanks.